Water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, I didn't know anything about the last airbender. Then, everything changed when my best friend said, let's do a podcast. We could call it Avatar State Radio. 6,953 days had passed before I discovered Avatar, not the blue cats, but a 19-year-old cartoon. Like Aang, I have a lot to learn, but I believe I'll love Avatar The Last Airbender. Welcome to this week's edition of Avatar State Radio. I am the last podbender, Kevin Gallagher, joined by
Mike D'Angelo.
We are here to discuss this week's episode of Avatar. I think the last time we met, we did a two-parter in one episode, episode 7 and 8, as one episode last time you heard us. So we're back to the normal schedule, I think, until maybe the season finale.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, we're recording 2 at a time.
Yes,
but everybody else is going to get some one-offs until I think that season finale is going to be what does it for them.
Yes, yeah. And then I to peel the curtain back even further, I was trying to get an idea of how we needed to record to have this season be like done, for us to be done recording by the end of June. And then I was like, let me see what the schedule looks like without like looking at titles, episode titles and stuff like that. Let me just like look to see what is like two-parter, what's not a two-parter. Because it feels like going forward, anything that's a two-parter we'll probably record as one giant episode.
Right.
But anyway, that's all behind the curtains. And I mean, now at the time of recording, we were supposed to be airing a few days ago. I wanted to debut Avatar State Radio at Fan Expo, Philadelphia. However, and I think, Mike, you can attest to this, there was just, even when you think you have everything ready to go for Fan Expo, and I know it's got to be worse for you because you're actually like selling merchandise, the week of, or even like the 2 days beforehand, it's like, oh my God, I have to do everything still.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, so we don't have to go way off track, but we ran a Kickstarter that coincided with Fan Expo, and it just did not go well because I have too much going on. It's a shame that I think we both run into similar issues, and we've talked about this off air before, where like there's just so much work for like one or two people on either side of like our aisles, what you're working on, what I'm working on, like to do. Like we really need a team, but that's not how DIY indies do it. It's always kind of on your own, or you likely, like for Fan Expo at least, it's a lot of work, because you're running 2 tables, but at least you have the built-in like, well, guess what, hun, you're selling half this table, so right.
Anyway, you can probably catch, I think I have to book a Fan Expo recap for Everything is Awesome, probably with Mike, to be honest. So you can catch that probably at this point months ago on the Everything is Awesome feed. But if you're listening to this now, Everything is Awesome is on season break anyway, so go listen to it. You got nothing better to do other than listening to this show and watching Avatar with us, which, let's get to it. We are on the 9th episode of book 1. Remind me if I'm wrong, Mike, this episode was called the Water Scroll?
The Waterbending Scroll.
Waterbending Scroll. Which I got to say now, and this is just slightly off topic, the Fortnite game recently had bending powers that you could like pick up as a weapon, and they were scrolls. So now this all makes sense. Like that makes a whole lot more sense now.
It ties into the show a little bit because thus far, everything that was being taught, person to person.
Yeah, and it's nuts that the scrolls are literally, it's like a textbook, really. That's all it is. It's not like it's giving anyone special powers to be able to do the bending.
Right. It's not just like a D&D magic scroll or anything like that. It's just that, hey, this is the Tai Chi stance that you need to use.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, out of the powers that I got to use in Fortnite before ATLA went away, which was, I think I just got to use water and airbending because I didn't really have time to play because of Fan Expo. Uh, Airbending, sorry, Aang, sucked. But but waterbending, fantastic. And we see it in I don't know if we see it in episode 9 here, but we do see it in one of the episodes we watched, and we've seen it in the past where Katara uses like ice as well, and that's such like, and that was in Fortnite too. Like that's just such a cool little variant of the water bending power. Is that like it's not just the fact that you're controlling like water and moving water and bending water, like you're actually able to control whether it's a liquid or a solid.
Yeah, you're fundamentally changing its composition.
And I wonder if, like, to that end, can you change it into a gas?
I mean, I would assume so. Although at the same time, like thus far, we've only seen Katara like use water when it's readily available in liquid form. Like we never see her break it out of ice, as far as I know, and I don't think she draws that out of like air. Versus the Fire Nation, where they're like blowing stuff out from like their lungs and stuff.
Yeah. I will be, especially now that we've seen, and this is kind of getting kicked into the episode 9 here, is seeing water bending used to a greater degree, because I would imagine if we were told by Roku we have the end of summer before Aang has to master everything. Well, book 1, as it's called, Book of Water, will be him mastering water, and then I would imagine, I'm guessing the timeline here is season 2 and 3 take place immediately after this season, so that season 3 or book 3 wraps up near the end of summer when the comet's supposed to come back, is my guess. But so like he's going to be quickly learning water bending right now. We'll probably have a slow burn for the other 2, but now that we're in like the back half, or we're approaching the back half of book 1 here, we're going to see a lot more water bending, and I hope water bending combined with air bending.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't see it from a Katara or anything, but you would see it with Aang, like if he was able to manipulate both elements at the same time.
Or a tag team where she is manipulating the water and he's manipulating the air around it.
Right. Yeah, you could certainly see that. I mean, really, all you need is a bit of a hurricane in order to combine those 2 elements.
Right. But this episode opens up with like Aang very worried about the timeline he's on, which is kind of funny when you really think about it, because like he is like the fun-hearted kid who's like, let me just play all the time. And there is moments, maybe not necessarily in this episode, but definitely, there are moments where we see him have fun still. And despite this timeline,
yeah, you can't take the kid out of his age or anything like that. So
and I honestly, and maybe, I don't know if I said this last time we recorded, because for us it's been a while, but I don't know if that was necessarily a worry of me. Like, oh, now there's this timeline that Aang is against, and now he's going to be like no fun kid, Mr. Serious kid trying to learn how to be an avatar. Because what makes this show so special is Aang's childlike behaviors.
It wouldn't work, I don't think, if it was a bunch of adults, no, because you wouldn't be able to have that fun, I think, because we kind of, I mean, these days, you and I are certainly childlike as well, so I think we're against the grain there, but I think like in a world like this that exists, it's hard to find someone who's older who's got the kind of sensibilities that Aang has.
Right, absolutely. I mean, his friend, and I'm gonna always forget his name. It starts with a B, but the king who
Boomy.
is now Boomy. Yes, he's got the same sensibilities as Aang, and I don't know why. I mean, that's great for him, and maybe it was just the fact that he saw his
best friend from 100 years ago back to life as a child. It brought it out in him. But yeah, absolutely. Like no one else in this show other than Aang has that childlike wonder. And part of that could be because like he is the youngest kid that we tend to see in the show, or at least that we spend time with. And that all these other kids, regardless of their age, because it's not like Katara and Sokka are like super older, but like they are just like they live through some shit.
Right. Yeah, they've seen some stuff. Now, I will say Katara is kind of the straight character as far as like everything goes, but Sokka certainly has like his goofy moments still. I feel like him and Aang kind of like bounce around with like a lot of the goofiness, whereas Katara, despite being younger than Sokka, you can see throughout the Water Scroll or the Waterbending Scroll and the next episode that we'll talk about as well. She's the one that's got like more of a hothead. Like she's the voice of reason sometimes, but you flip that coin and she does some things that are more in line with somebody who's going to take some risks and do some more adult things.
And we see that in this episode right here where, they say, you know what, Aang, we don't need we need to get to the North Pole for you to learn properly, but like, let's take a time out. Like it's going to take weeks anyway. We have to stop and let's take a time out and let me show you what I know is what Katara says. And the speed of which he picks up the ability to waterbend, which is likely because he's the Avatar, and he has an innate ability. And also, he not for nothing, the art of bending, while there's different elements, what we've kind of learned in this episode is that the art of bending is more or less, I don't want to, it's not the same, but there is a general practice. It's all kinds of different forms of like karate or tai chi or one of those
movement.
things.
It's dance, there's a sense to it where it's like you really, I think it's somatic. Like you would need to have some kind of gestural command of it. Not necessarily, because I will say that, we mentioned it earlier, like the firebenders can kind of like just brew it up out of their chests and stuff.
Right. I mean, theirs is certainly, I think, the grittiest of the 4 bending movements. Like there's still, yes, they can just kind of bring it out of nothing, but there's still like a kind of movement that they have and a dance that they have with it.
Right. I think, but the basic stance and movement with everything is that, yes, there does exist some kind of that. And I would assume that that's kind of how to move into, those sort of beginning stages of learning bending. But, again, we've seen the firebenders just kind of breathe fire without having to make any movements. And we've seen Aang blow out air as well without having to do any kind of Tai Chi or anything.
True. And so one would assume that, a combination of it being an innate ability of his and that he did have presumably 12 years of airbending practice before he got frozen. I know he's only 12, but I imagine, it's very Jedi-like. Like as soon as he can walk, he's probably got 10 to 12 years of training before he goes on ice. So, you see him just take to it very easily. And there is a jealousy that Katara has, and that's that anger. And we don't see the anger quite yet, but there is that jealousy and that frustration, that hotheadness that you mentioned starts to creep out.
She had to work a lot harder for it, Aang just gets it right away. And I mean, the concern has always been, hey, I have, all this, just this short amount of time to get these things going. And, I only know airbending. And then in the span of a day, he's got waterbending down pretty good.
One would argue that as he's learning from Katara, and he makes this point, he has a teacher, she didn't, but as he's learning, he's getting better at it than she is.
Right. Yeah, because she's not able to do the things that he does immediately. The size of those waves. The whippy, thing where he puts a little flourish on it above his head, and she's
Yep,
like, "You didn't
yep,
have to like humiliate me," basically.
Yep. And you know, we see that throughout the episode where whenever she's doing waterbending Katara with Aang, or even without Aang, like she gets very frustrated. And to a point where at one point when they are doing it together again later in the episode, like she has like a straight meltdown and screams. We've never seen her this mad. When she screams at Aang.
Yeah, and it's like you could tell that she doesn't want to be, because she's supposed to be the clear-headed, rational one. So it is very funny to see her flip that coin. You know, like Sokka's always the one who's kind of like arrogant and everything like that, but she's usually cool-headed. So to see her boil over, basically, to use a water euphemism, it is funny to see that kind of flip. So I mean, there's a certain amount of duality to everybody, because you've got Aang with his kind of childishness, and then his willingness to go to great lengths to try and learn and to be prepared. You've got Sokka with his kind of goofiness, and then how he can turn it serious, and then you've got Katara, who goes from level-headed to hot-headed.
Yeah. And we part of the story with the gang here that we kind of glossed over because we already talked about them using the scroll a little bit, but they do run into pirates, which is actually like is kind of set up also in the beginning of the episode with Sokka and Katara like saying, Aang, you're just not going to hold the money anymore. You just like to spend money, because he spends money on the sky bison. Well, I guess we don't know it's the bison whistle at that point, but
Right.
he spends
and
money.
we would have assumed that his earlier accident that morning was also responsible for them losing all their money prior to that as well.
Yes,
because they said that they got money from Boomy, and I would assume Boomy gave him a decent amount to have supplies and provisions and stuff.
Right. Yeah. So like, not only do they lose like all of their supplies and provisions, or most of it, they also, if there was any money in there, like all they had left was a few copper bits or whatever they call it. And Aang then goes and buys this whistle that, at first glance and in the beginning of the episode means nothing. They're like, it doesn't even work. Like, it just, Momo is staring at you like you're a fool.
Right. We don't necessarily know that it works either, because by the end of the episode, yes, like Appa comes out of the blue, but he was kind of under that waterfall anyway, right? Like that's where I assume they were. It could have been another waterfall,
Yeah, around there. And like, we've also seen Appa come and save the day before. I mean, a lot of times it's initiated with like Momo. I think Momo was actually with them at this point. So one would argue that, skipping all the way to the end of this episode here, when it's revealed that whistle he bought in the beginning of the episode was a sky bison whistle, that is, for those that needed a real world equivalent, it's a dog whistle.
Right.
And one would argue that they imply that it works, and that it does what it functions. And you would assume that Sokka and Katara are now like okay with that purchase. It makes sense why he bought that.
Yeah, saved our life.
Right. But that scene kind of leads into the scene when they get to this little pirate town, or this little town with pirates in it, where like again, and this is like, I would say within hours, right, of him like being so concerned that he needs to learn waterbending, him and his childlike wonder at like haggling with a pirate,
right, in a humorous way. Like it's not as though he is taking the element of what they're experiencing and kind of dialing it down to, hey, like I need to be serious now. It's like he's having a good time with it. He's dealing with it like a kid would.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of my favorite parts of this episode, and I know we talked about this before, how it pops up, but is the chase when the pirates realize that they've been robbed by, ultimately we find out, Katara. And it's the chase scene, and we see this poor cabbage guy, the cabbage salesman,
This guy that we saw. What was the name of the Earth Village?
Omashu.
Omashu. It's the same because he makes reference to that village. Same dude, and then Aang like they do their best, the gang, to avoid spilling over the cart until Aang like does like this matrix jump through it, and then uses his airbending to blow it and push it over towards the pirates that are chasing him. This
Right.
poor cabbage salesman.
This dude's day is just completely ruined.
Like one would assume that he probably left Amashu because like, all right, I'm tired of this. Like, I'm just getting my cabbage cart like ruined every so often. I'm gonna go to do we ever get a name for this pirate village that we're in?
I don't believe so. I think it's just the village because I think they do that a lot. Like it's not named. It's not specifically noted in this episode or the next episode where like what the towns are called or anything like that.
But this poor guy is just like, let me find a new village to go to where there's not all these benders around, right? Like, and I'm going to risk Earth ruining my cabbage. And then this poor guy just gets to this village and so happens to run into, and I don't know if he recognizes them, but he's definitely seen them before. These 3 kids, one of which is an airbender. And probably at this point, most people know that like, oh, if there's the airbenders around, that's the Avatar, right? Because he's the only one. So, like, this poor dude just can't catch a break.
So, the birth of a villain, perhaps?
Oh, my God. Could you imagine, like, and, like, I'm not even talking in this series or any series you have ever watched, Mike. In a brand new series coming to Netflix or Paramount Plus or whatever, is going to be some sort of, ATLA story, airbender story that it ends up the big bad is the cabbage salesman all the way from book 1 of ATLA.
Right. We're two shows in the future and the original cabbage salesman's dead. So we find out that his descendant has become a cabbage bender.
The cabbage bender. Like, I mean, and
the first
realistically, and realistically, like that makes sense to me. Like that, like the way that the magic or whatever the powers work here, like why not? Why not have? I mean, hey, they almost thought that Momo was an earthbender, so I'm for it. Give me the cabbage, the first cabbage bender, as you said.
There we go.
But and something that also happens like near the start of this episode, and it's like a very fun callback several times throughout the episode, is when Iroh and Zuko are on their ship, and it's so funny how like Zuko gets so pissy about this about the Lotus Tile when
the Lotus
that's
Tile
awesome.
From the Pai Show game.
Yeah, and it's ultimately what like almost got you. Like you had him, you had the last Airbender, you had the Avatar, all because of your uncle wanting to stop and get a new Lotus Tile.
Right, that he had all along.
The ultimate fun part, like the ultimate fun, punchline is that he had it all along. And here's another episode where like they probably, Zuko is more prominent than in some other episodes where like he's in the background or not there at all. But another fun episode where like they are barely in it, and Zuko and Uncle, like when they are in it, they find their time to shine and shine brightly. And again, like I think at the last episode I was like, I'm convinced Uncle's just bad. Like he is a bad guy. But he is just such a fun guy to like. I root for him, and I know ultimately, like I'm gonna have to not, but I like Iroh. I can't help it.
Yeah, Iroh is definitely like a fan favorite, whether or not he turns, not confirming or denying your theory or anything like that. But he's definitely like anytime you see a meme, like 9 times out of 10, it's featuring him.
Right.
So there's one thing that I wanted to mention, and it shows up in both of these episodes that we'll talk about, today for the audience, episodes 9 and 10. this is an episode where we get to see people who are not benders really get to shine as well, because all the pirates are very skilled, combatants and stuff like that. So they've, they managed to keep up with the gang pretty well, and the Fire Nation as well.
Yeah, because the pirates are, classic pirates, right? Like, they're not in it for anybody. They do not care. They do not care, Mike, what's going on in the world. They could care less that there's a war. That the Fire Nation is literally, maybe not literally. Maybe they are not the equivalent of Nazis and Hitler, but like pretty darn close. Like, they are taking over the world. But they don't care. They're like, oh, you know what? You're going to pay us to find this kid with an arrow on his head? Okay. Oh, this kid with an arrow on his head is worth a lot more money? Screw you, Fire Nation. We're going to go and sell him elsewhere.
Yeah, presumably to the Fire Lord.
Right.
And the thing about that is, like, if you do that, like, the world is pretty much doomed. And it's kind of like, the people who these days are like, I don't care if what I'm going to do is going to ruin the world as long as I get mine first.
Right. Which is, it's wild how, because like back when this show was airing, which was what, like around 06, 2006-ish, 2005-ish, something like that.
2005 was this episode that we were talking about.
Wild, because like really, and maybe we were younger, so maybe for us that like it wasn't apparent. But like, ahead of its time in that way, right? Like not that I think the show is political, but there is some of that, like, by nature of what the story is, there is one nation who is trying to take over the world. There is some political, story in this show, and wild how that plays, just as well as in the 1940s as it does now in the 2020s, right? Like, crazy.
Right.
So yeah, but we do see the pirates who are very skilled fighters who are now, again, I appreciate that we don't see Avatar State in this episode. It's something that I'm hoping that we, and I can't remember the last time we saw it. Maybe was it last week? I think so. Last episode
with the Avatar State.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think he briefly has to do it when he's because that was the Roku episode, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He definitely went a little nuts and blew up the tower.
Right. So, I like that we're going to hopefully see less and less than that as he's learning the other powers. And I would love to see, throughout the next couple seasons before we have like the series finale, like maybe a handful of times we see it when it's needed, and until he's mastered everything. And then like you see, I'm interested to see an Avatar State where Aang is in control.
Right, because thus far it's been a tool, but not one that he does control. It's something that in some instances kind of appears, I guess, by way of the previous avatars. It's the link that he has to all those who came before him, and they're kind of taking the wheel.
Yeah, and very specifically, not to dwell on the previous set of episodes too much, but I mean, very specifically in that previous episode, like you see Roku, like he literally like somehow has a physical embodiment, or at least projects himself through Aang. Yeah, I mean, it's he's not been in control yet. I would argue that I guess technically he was in control last time, but it wasn't. It was Roku in control, not Aang.
Right. Yeah, because he even like kind of, alludes to the idea that he has to lose control in order for Roku to come in.
Yes, absolutely. Now, by the time we're getting near the end of the episode here, we have, Katara at this point, who we neglected to say the whole reason that the Fire Nation really even has an opportunity to get Aang and that the pirates can capture him is that Katara sneaks off like early in the morning or in the middle of the night or whatever with the scroll to practice waterbending, because she just can't get over the fact that and she's apologized too. Like, she knows that she did bad, and she has apologized to Aang about, losing her cool, but she can't get over the fact that like someone who's been practicing waterbending her whole life is not as good as someone who started less than 24 hours ago. And it's that lack of hubris, I guess, where she
it's too much hubris.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, so too much. Maybe I just don't know words, Mike.
Yeah, hubris is just pride or arrogance,
and where she needs to be better. She needs to be, and that's a crazy thing to think. Like, even if she was a master waterbender, right? Like, as soon as that avatar masters it, you instantly aren't the best. Like, Aang is going to be the best bender no matter the element at the end of the day. It might not be at the end of this war, because he's on the quick path, but like at the end of the day, at some point before this kid turns into an old man and dies, like he will be better at every bending ability than any other bender because he's the avatar.
Right.
So it's wild that she's getting so jealous because she's up until this episode been like the cool-headed one, really.
Right. Well, and you know what we've mentioned, like Aang, being the child that he is, he's got the childlike sensibilities, and he's 12. Katara is only 14, so like it does kind of make sense. Like she is
absolutely
still,
right. Yeah, absolutely. So. That is a great point. But yeah, we see them unite and like work together to get the boat that they're hijacking into the water and to avoid going down a fire cliff. That doesn't even make any sense.
Fire cliff.
A waterfall, and just working together. Well, I think though, out of everything that's happened that we've talked about, maybe the only thing I like more than what I'm about to talk about is the very ending, or not maybe at the very ending, but the close to the ending scene when Uncle says, "Oh, the lotus tile was in my sleeve the whole time." That may be my favorite bit of the episode, but a very close second, and one could argue better than that scene, is like, this is the most action Momo I think has seen in the series thus far.
Oh yeah, he's getting hunted down.
He's getting hunted by this like parrot thing,
reptile bird.
Yeah, and like he's like he's a little badass lemur guy because like he takes care of himself. He wraps that reptile bird up in a sail or some sort of cloth.
It was I think it was the flag at the top of one of the masts.
Okay, yeah. And like just a very like nothing scene at the end of the day. But
you know what though? I'll say this. Presumably all the pirates who they were fighting got off the boat one way or the other, right? Aang and Katara used various forms of bending to deal with them. I would assume some of them got to the shore and stuff. But did the bird make it out alive?
That's a good point. I would assume, yeah, right. Like they're not gonna, it's Nickelodeon. But maybe not. Maybe there's a dark story there, and maybe it blends in with the cabbage salesman's grandson. Or whoever we mentioned earlier. Maybe that the cabbage salesman, the cabbage bender will have his animal companion will be the grandson of this reptile parrot.
There we go.
But yeah, overall, fun episode. It pushed the story forward. While still being a little bit of a filler, but like not like this had the perfect blend, I think, of everything that this show has been so far. Maybe save for like heavy emotion, which is not something the show does too often because it's a kid's show. So other than that, though, everything else that this show does really, really great. This episode like just hit on the head perfectly.
Yeah, I was very pleased with it, watching it my second time and everything like that. It is like the start of certain things for some of the characters because we do see, Katara begin to embrace the need to be better as well. In the very beginning of the series, she does recognize that she wants to be a waterbender, but it's been slow going for her. So for her to have a new tool in her toolbox gives her a little bit more fun stuff to work with. And we just get to see, a fun episode with characters who really are not on any side of the war kind of join and do some fun stuff and show that you don't necessarily need to be a bender to be badass.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Love this. Was this? Is this one of the ones that, like you said, was like the lowest rated?
No, we got 2 more episodes before that. So
okay. I was gonna say it's crazy. Crazy if this was the lowest rated,
know.
Because
you'll know when you watch it.
Fair enough. No, but I again, maybe it's because I've been away from it for a few weeks now, based off on how we've been recording. But one of my favorite episodes, just pure goodness all around. Before we step away, Mike, do you have any trivia you'd like to share with this episode?
Well, I sure do. We talked a little bit about Tai Chi, and the movement that we see Katara doing with the water whip is actually a Tai Chi posture called the single whip, and on the scroll itself is a 24-step form of Tai Chi called the Beijing form, and it literally says waterbending practicing first set.
The amount of detail that gets put into show, and as I know it's not exclusive to this show, right? Like, but this is a kids show, and a lot of kids shows, the amount of detail that the creators and the animator, and who knows where it comes from. Is it the showrunner? Is it the writers? Is it the animators? It's probably a combination of everybody working together to make this great piece of entertainment for us. The amount of detail they put in, that's fantastic.
Agreed. All right, we got to wrap up this show. We got another one to do.
I was waiting to see if there was more trivia. Okay.
No. We're all trivia'd out.
All right, Mike. Before we officially roll out and get ready to go up on the sky bison in the sky and rest our heads until the next episode, where can people find you?
You can find me on tellus.com, or you can find me on our premium sites, patreon.com/tellus, or tellus.etsy.com, or you can see me live Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/thattellusguy.
And I am Kevin Gallagher. You can find me on my other podcast, Everything is Awesome, where I sit down and talk to awesome people about awesome things in the long form conversational interviews. But generally speaking, just go to thatnerdykev.com, and that should get you to everywhere I am on the interwebs. We'll see you, next time right here on Avatar State Radio, only on avatarstateradio.com.